Chapter 1. Foundations. Jackson Weber wiped sweat from his brow as he stared at the 12 lines of code that would either make or break quantum dynamics. The fluorescent lights of his private office at midnight cast harsh shadows across his unshaven face. At 35, he looked older than his years, the cost of building an empire that nobody knew existed. His cell phone buzzed. It was a text from his wife, Danielle. "Coming home tonight? Or is your consulting gig keeping you busy again?" The sarcasm in her message wasn't subtle. For the past 8 months, Jackson had maintained the charade that he was working as a mid-level IT consultant, making a comfortable but unimpressive $75,000 a year. In reality, he had secretly founded Quantum Dynamics 5 years ago, and the small startup had grown into a tech behemoth worth billions. Only the board of directors and his executive team knew his true identity. To the rest of the company and the world, Jackson Weber was just a name on confidential paperwork. The public face of Quantum Dynamics was his hand-picked CEO, Vincent Blackwood, who handled press conferences and publicity while Jackson pulled the strings from the shadows. Jackson rubbed his tired eyes. This deception hadn't been his original plan. It had started 3 years into his marriage to Danielle, when her behavior began to change. The woman who had once loved his drive and ambition started complaining about his dedication to work. She began pushing him to take a less demanding job so they could live a little. But Jackson couldn't abandon quantum dynamics, not when they were on the verge of revolutionary breakthroughs in quantum computing. So he made a decision. He would step out of the spotlight and let Vincent become the company's public image. He told Danielle he'd taken a pay cut for fewer hours, and she had seemed pleased. For a while, the arrangement worked. The office door opened, and Priya Sharma, his chief technology officer, and one of the few people who knew his true identity, walked in. "You're still here," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "The Morrison merger documents are ready for your signature." "Thanks, Priya." Jackson took the folder. "Did legal check everything twice?" "3 times. Preston says it's ironclad." She paused. "You realize what this means, right? Once Morrison Tech is absorbed into quantum, we'll control 40% of the quantum computing market. The acquisition will put us at a $50 billion valuation." Jackson nodded, and the board unanimously approved. Every single member. "They trust your vision." Priya hesitated. "Jackson, can I speak freely?" "Always. Why are you still hiding who you are from your wife? You've built something revolutionary. Most people would be shouting it from the rooftops." Jackson's jaw tightened. "It's complicated. Is it? Or are you just afraid to find out who she really is? The woman who supposedly loves you for you, not your success or money." Jackson signed the documents without responding. The truth was more complicated than Priya could understand. There had been moments over the past 2 years when he'd nearly told Danielle everything. But each time, something stopped him, a dismissive comment about tech bros, or the way she rolled her eyes whenever the name Quantum Dynamics appeared in the news. "The official announcement goes out tomorrow," Jackson said, changing the subject. "Make sure Vincent is prepared for the press conference." "He's ready. But shouldn't you be there? This is your vision coming to life." Jackson shook his head. "I'll watch from here." Same as always. After Priya left, Jackson gathered his things. It was nearly 1 a.m. when he pulled into the driveway of his suburban home, modest by tech mobile standards, but comfortable enough to match his supposed consultant's salary. The house was dark except for the kitchen light. Jackson found a plate of cold food in the microwave with a note. Waited until 10. Went to bed. He ignored the food and poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey. As he drank, he scrolled through his phone until he found the folder labeled D. Inside were dozens of screenshots from their phone bill, showing late-night calls to the same number, texts sent when she claimed to be at yoga, and location data that contradicted her stories. For 6 months, Jackson had been collecting evidence. He wasn't a fool. The emotional distance, the constant criticism, the mysterious girls' nights that left her returning home at 3 a.m. with her makeup perfect, all pointed to one conclusion. His private investigator had confirmed his suspicions 2 months ago. The man's name was Richard Calloway, a local business owner who ran an upscale restaurant downtown, where Danielle had started working part-time for fun last year. Jackson drained his whiskey and closed the folder. Tomorrow, after the Morrison merger announcement, everything would change. But for tonight, he would continue his charade a little longer. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The Morrison merger sent shockwaves through the tech world. Business networks erupted with analysis of how quantum dynamics, already an industry titan, had secured its position as the dominant force in quantum computing. Stock prices soared, and Vincent Blackwood's face was splashed across financial publications worldwide. Meanwhile, Jackson Weber ate lunch at his desk in a nondescript office building, maintaining his facade as an IT consultant for a company that didn't actually exist. His co-workers, actors hired by a discreet staffing agency and sworn to secrecy, carried on mundane conversations about weekend plans and sports teams. His burner phone buzzed with a text from Curtis Reynolds, his head of security. Subject visited location number 3 at 11:30. Remained for 1 hour. Second subject present. Audio confirms suspicions. Location number 3 was the upscale apartment Jackson had been paying to monitor for months. A pied terra leased by Richard Calloway in a building just outside downtown. Jackson's jaw tightened. Danielle had told him she was having lunch with her mother today. "Rough day, Jack?" asked Linda, one of his fake co-workers, noticing his expression. Jackson forced a smile. "Just a system migration issue. Nothing serious." His real phone rang. Danielle. He stepped outside to take the call. "Hey," she said, her voice overly cheerful. "I forgot to tell you that Mom invited us for Thanksgiving next week." "I already said yes." Jackson clenched his teeth. Margaret Weathers, his mother-in-law, had never approved of him. In her eyes, he'd never been good enough for her daughter, despite coming from a respectable background. What Margaret didn't know was that Jackson had grown up in crushing poverty before his intelligence and fierce determination had won him scholarships to MIT. He'd built his first company in his dorm room and sold it for $8 million at 23. Quantum dynamics had been his second venture, the one he'd poured his soul into. "Sure," he replied evenly. "I'll put in for the time off." "Mom says we should stay the whole weekend," Danielle added. Quality family time. Quality time with a woman who looked at him like something she'd scraped off her designer shoes. Exactly what Jackson needed. "Sounds great," he lied. That evening, Jackson arrived home to find Danielle dressed to go out, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "You're going somewhere?" he asked, setting down his laptop bag. "Girls' night with Kelsey and Amanda. I told you this morning." She hadn't mentioned anything, but Jackson nodded anyway. "Have fun. Don't wait up." She gave him a quick peck on the cheek, leaving a smudge of red lipstick that she didn't bother to wipe away. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, Jackson opened his laptop and accessed the security systems he'd discreetly installed throughout the house. He pulled up footage from their bedroom the previous night and fast-forwarded to after he'd left for work. Danielle had spent 30 minutes on a phone call, speaking too quietly for the microphones to pick up. Then she'd opened the back of their closet, removed a panel Jackson hadn't known existed, and pulled out a burner phone of her own. "Clever," Jackson muttered. He'd never thought to check for hidden compartments. He switched to a different camera feed and watched as Danielle drove not toward Kelsey's house, but downtown, parking near Richard's restaurant. She checked her appearance in the rearview mirror, then walked inside, greeted warmly by the staff. Richard emerged from the back, his face lighting up at the sight of her. They embraced for longer than was appropriate between an employer and employee. Jackson closed the laptop. The familiar numbness settled over him. The same feeling he'd experienced when his private investigator had first confirmed the affair. He wasn't angry. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, he needed clarity. He walked to their home office and opened the safe hidden behind a landscape painting. Inside was a USB drive containing everything he'd built. Quantum dynamics proprietary algorithms, financial records proving his ownership, and the evidence of Danielle's betrayal. He'd prepared this fail-safe months ago, when the first suspicions had arisen. His phone rang, Priya calling from the office. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "The Department of Justice is making noise about antitrust concerns with the Morrison acquisition. They're talking about an investigation." "Let them investigate," Jackson replied calmly. "Our legal team has vetted everything." "It's not just that. There's a leak somewhere, Jackson. Someone's feeding information to the regulators that could only have come from inside our executive team." Jackson frowned. "Have Curtis investigate everyone. Discreetly. Already on it. But there's something else you should know." Priya hesitated. "Vincent has been taking meetings we can't account for. Off the books." Vincent Blackwood had been with Jackson since the beginning, his first hire and most trusted ally. The idea that he might be involved in corporate espionage seemed absurd. "Keep watching him," Jackson said. "But don't confront him yet. I need proof before I make any moves." After hanging up, Jackson poured himself another whiskey and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Betrayal on all sides. His wife, possibly his closest business associate. Everything he'd built was at risk. But Jackson Weber hadn't clawed his way up from nothing by crumbling under pressure. If they wanted to take what was his, they'd learn why the board of directors called him the Silent Wolf behind closed doors. Not because he was quiet, but because when he struck, his enemies never saw him coming. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. Thanksgiving at the Weathers estate was exactly as Jackson had anticipated, an exercise in psychological warfare disguised as a family gathering. Margaret Weathers' colonial-style mansion in Connecticut reeked of old money and bitter judgment, from the ancestral portraits lining the halls to the sterling silver place settings that had apparently been in the family for generations. Jackson and Danielle arrived Wednesday evening. He'd taken the fake consulting job's expected days off, while she'd arranged for her assistant manager at the restaurant to cover her shifts. Jackson knew from his surveillance that Richard had also taken the weekend off, claiming to visit family in Boston. In reality, he'd booked a suite at a hotel 30 minutes from the Weathers estate. Convenient coincidences. Margaret greeted them at the door, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression pinched as she air-kissed her daughter, then barely acknowledged Jackson's existence. "Danielle, darling, you look exhausted," she said, examining her daughter critically. "I've been telling you for years that you need to prioritize self-care." "Good to see you too, Margaret," Jackson said, extending the bottle of expensive wine he'd brought, one that cost more than his supposed weekly salary, but he doubted she'd notice. She accepted it with a cursory glance. "How thoughtful. I'll have the staff open it with dinner." The staff, as if she were hosting a royal gala instead of a family Thanksgiving. Dinner that night was a preview of the next day's hostilities. Margaret's subtle digs about Jackson's career escalated as she drank more wine. "Danielle tells me you're still with that IT company," she said, cutting into her filet mignon. "How consistent of you." "I like stability," Jackson replied mildly. "Stability is admirable in a savings account. Less so in a son-in-law," Margaret countered. "Ambition is what separates the wheat from the chaff, Jackson." Danielle stared at her plate, saying nothing to defend him. Not that Jackson expected her to. She'd stopped being his ally long ago. "I have ambitions," he said. "They're just not centered around impressing others." Margaret's eyebrows arched. Clearly. Later that night, lying in the guest bedroom, Jackson heard Danielle's phone buzz repeatedly. She checked it, then whispered, "I'm going to get some air." "Can't sleep. Want company?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "No, I'll just be a few minutes." "You rest." The moment she left, Jackson opened his laptop and accessed the tracking app he'd installed on her phone. He watched as the dot representing Danielle moved down the driveway, into a waiting car, and off toward the hotel where Richard was staying. Jackson closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would be the culmination of months of planning. Everything was in place. Curtis had compiled the final evidence packet. Priya had prepared the board for emergency action, and his attorneys had the divorce papers ready. The only variable was Vincent Blackwood. Despite weeks of investigation, they'd found nothing conclusive linking him to the leak. His mysterious meetings had turned out to be with a cancer specialist. Vincent had been diagnosed 3 months ago and had been keeping it private. Jackson felt a pang of guilt for suspecting him. When Danielle returned 2 hours later, her hair freshly brushed and wearing different clothes than she'd left in, Jackson pretended to be asleep. He listened to her shower, washing away evidence of her rendezvous, before slipping back into bed. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, everything ends. The Thanksgiving dinner itself was a masterclass in passive-aggressive hostility. Margaret had invited several of her country club friends, apparently to showcase her daughter and simultaneously emphasize Jackson's inadequacy. The conversation flowed around business successes, vacation homes, and recent luxury purchases, all designed to highlight what Jackson couldn't provide. Vincent texted during the appetizer course. DOJ backed off. Morrison deal officially cleared. Press release going out at 3 p.m. Jackson suppressed a smile and pocketed his phone. "Work calling on Thanksgiving?" Margaret asked sharply. "I suppose that IT help desk never closes." "Mom," Danielle murmured. but there was no conviction in her objection. I'm just saying that in my day, men provided properly for their wives. Margaret continued, sipping her third martini. Your father built an investment firm from nothing. He made sure we wanted for nothing. We don't want for anything, Mom, Danielle said half-heartedly. Really? Margaret's eyes narrowed. That's not what you told me last week when you were crying about postponing having children because you can't afford a bigger house. Jackson's head snapped up. This was news to him. Danielle had told him she wanted to wait because she wasn't ready for motherhood yet. Margaret, Jackson said carefully, Danielle and I make our decisions together. We're comfortable financially. Comfortable. Margaret's voice rose. My daughter wasn't raised to be comfortable. She was raised for excellence. For luxury. Jackson noticed Richard Calloway's name flash on Danielle's phone screen before she quickly turned it face down. His resolve hardened. Your daughter seems to have adjusted her expectations, he said calmly. Because she's settled, Margaret shot back. Your salary is pathetic. My daughter deserves better. The table fell silent. Danielle's face flushed, but instead of defending him, she gave a small nod of agreement. That nod was all Jackson needed to see. Would you all excuse me for a moment? He stood, napkin placed deliberately on the table. I need to make a call. In the hallway, Jackson dialed Vincent's number. It's time. Execute protocol, Omega. Are you sure? Vincent asked. Once we do this. I'm sure. She just agreed with her mother that my pathetic salary means she deserves better. Meanwhile, her lover is texting her at the Thanksgiving table. Vincent was silent for a moment. Understood. The board has been notified. The security team is ready. I'll make the announcement instead of the scheduled press release. Thank you, Vincent. Jackson paused. How are you feeling? The treatments. I'm holding up. Focus on what you need to do. I've got the company covered. Jackson returned to the dining room, where conversation had resumed awkwardly. Margaret was still holding court, listing the accomplishments of Danielle's ex-boyfriend from college who was now apparently a hotshot surgeon. Sorry for the interruption, Jackson said, retaking his seat. Important IT emergency? Margaret's voice dripped with condescension. Actually, that was my board of directors. Jackson reached for his water glass. The $50 billion Morrison merger is complete. The table went silent again, confusion evident on every face. You're what? Danielle asked, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Jackson removed his wallet and extracted a small leather case. From it, he withdrew his Quantum Dynamics Executive ID badge, the one identifying him as founder and chairman, and placed it on the table. My board of directors, he repeated calmly. I founded Quantum Dynamics 8 years ago. I own controlling interest. The Morrison Tech acquisition that's been all over the news this week. That was my deal. Margaret's face had gone pale. Danielle stared at the ID badge as if it might bite her. That's impossible, she whispered. Vincent Blackwood is the founder of Quantum. Vincent is an employee, a good friend and excellent CEO, but he reports to me. Jackson met Danielle's eyes. I've never been an IT consultant. That was a cover I created 3 years ago when you started criticizing my ambition and work ethic. I wanted to see if you loved me for who I am, not what I could provide. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a thick envelope, placing it beside his badge. Inside are divorce papers and evidence of your affair with Richard Calloway. Your lover should be receiving similar paperwork right about now, along with notification that his restaurant lease, which is owned by a Quantum Dynamics subsidiary, is being terminated effective immediately. Danielle's face crumpled. Jackson, I can explain. Don't bother. He stood again. Our prenuptial agreement is very clear about infidelity. You'll receive the settlement outlined therein. Generous, but nowhere near what you might have expected as the wife of a tech billionaire. Margaret found her voice at last. Now see here, you cannot just. Margaret, Jackson cut her off. Your opinion stopped mattering to me approximately 30 seconds after I met you. The only reason I've tolerated your condescension for 7 years is because I thought it was worth it for Danielle's sake. I was wrong. His phone buzzed, a news alert. Right on schedule, Vincent was announcing the successful Morrison acquisition, along with the revelation that Jackson Weber had been the true founder and visionary behind Quantum Dynamics all along. Jackson looked at Danielle one last time. I would have given you everything. All you had to do was love me for me, not what I could buy you. As he walked out of the dining room, leaving stunned silence behind him, Jackson felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The deception was over. Now the real work began, rebuilding his life on honest ground, without the woman who had proven herself unworthy of his trust. In the car, he made another call. Curtis, initiate Phase 2. His revenge was just beginning. Chapter 4, Countermoves. The first attack came 3 days after Thanksgiving. Jackson had expected retaliation, but not so quickly. He was in his office at Quantum Dynamics, his real office, the executive suite that had previously been attributed to Vincent, when Priya burst in without knocking. "We have a problem." She tossed a tablet onto his desk. On the screen was a breaking news story. Quantum Dynamics founder accused of sexual harassment. Jackson scanned the article. An anonymous former employee claimed he had pressured her for sexual favors in exchange for advancement. The details were vague but salacious enough to make headlines. "This is Danielle's work," he said, remarkably calm. "She's trying to damage my reputation before I can fully establish it publicly." "The board is already getting calls," Priya said. "Should we issue a denial?" "Not yet. Let's see what else she has planned." He didn't have to wait long. By evening, 2 more anonymous sources had come forward with similar allegations. Social media was erupting with hashtags calling for boycotts of Quantum Dynamics products. Jackson called an emergency board meeting. The directors, mostly older men with traditional views, shifted uncomfortably as they discussed the allegations. "These claims are categorically false," Jackson told them firmly. "Think about it. I've deliberately stayed out of the public eye for years. How could I have harassed employees who didn't even know I was the founder?" "The timing is certainly suspicious," said Preston Mills, the company's chief counsel. "Coming right after your public revelation as founder." "It's more than suspicious," Jackson said. "It's orchestrated. My soon-to-be ex-wife is friends with Olivia Warner." The name caused several board members to exchange glances. Olivia Warner was a publicity specialist known for orchestrating social media campaigns, both to build people up and tear them down. "I've anticipated this," Jackson continued. "Curtis, please distribute the packets." Curtis Reynolds handed each board member a sealed envelope. Inside were sworn affidavits from female employees at all levels of the company, attesting to Jackson's professionalism and the company's positive culture for women. "I've spent years ensuring Quantum Dynamics is a meritocracy," Jackson said. 46% of our management positions are held by women, nearly twice the industry average. We don't just talk about diversity, we practice it." One by one, the board members relaxed. Preston spoke up first. "We should counterfile for defamation immediately. I can have papers drawn up by morning." "No," Jackson said, surprising them. "We won't dignify these allegations with a response yet. Let's see what else Danielle and Richard have planned." After the meeting, Jackson retreated to his private office. The allegations stung, but not as much as the betrayal that had prompted them. He pulled up the latest surveillance reports on his tablet. Danielle had moved in with Richard temporarily into the apartment above his restaurant. They'd met with Olivia Warner twice and had another meeting scheduled with Gregory Landau, a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney. Jackson's phone rang. "Vincent, how are you holding up?" his friend asked. "I've been better," Jackson admitted. "How about you? The treatment's going okay?" "As well as can be expected." Vincent paused. "Are you sure you want to handle this alone? The board would understand if you stepped back during this personal crisis. And let Danielle think she's won? Not a chance. Just be careful. Revenge has a way of consuming people." After hanging up, Jackson accessed the secure server where Curtis had been uploading surveillance data. He scrolled through photos of Danielle and Richard together, their affair now in the open. There were images of them meeting with Olivia, with Gregory, with people Jackson didn't recognize. One face caught his attention, a man leaving Richard's restaurant after an apparent meeting. Jackson zoomed in, then froze. It was Benjamin Morrison, former CEO of Morrison Tech, who had just sold his company to Quantum Dynamics. "What the hell?" Jackson muttered. He ran the image through facial recognition to confirm. His phone buzzed with a text from Curtis. "You need to see this now." Attached was a screenshot of an email from Benjamin Morrison to Richard Calloway. "Your information was correct. The DOJ is reopening their investigation based on the new evidence I provided." Weber won't know what hit him. Jackson's blood ran cold. So this was their play. Use Morrison to feed false information to regulators, potentially unwinding the merger and crippling Quantum Dynamics. He dialed Curtis. Get me everything on Benjamin Morrison. Financial records, phone logs, emails, anything that might explain why he'd turn against the merger after cashing out. Already on it, Curtis replied. But there's something else. Danielle accessed your home safe last week. Jackson's mind raced. The safe contained backup data, personal documents, and the contingency protocols, he realized aloud. She took the USB drive with the contingency protocols. Exactly. The entire defensive playbook for corporate crises, including regulatory investigations. Jackson closed his eyes. He'd created those protocols himself, step-by-step instructions for how Quantum would respond to various threats. With that information, Danielle and her allies could anticipate and counter every standard move. They're trying to force me to resign to save the company, Jackson said. They think if they create enough scandals, the board will push me out. Will they? Curtis asked bluntly. Not a chance. Activate the Ghost Protocol. There was a pause on the line. Are you sure? Once we go down that road. They fired the first shot, Curtis. I'm just making sure it's their last. Ghost Protocol was Jackson's ultimate contingency plan, one so secretive it existed only in the minds of his three most trusted allies, Curtis, Priya, and Vincent. It involved leveraging shadow companies, blind trusts, and foreign entities to apply pressure where conventional methods couldn't reach. Within hours, the first phase was in motion. By midnight, the ownership of Richard's restaurant building had changed hands 3 times, ultimately landing with a shell corporation controlled by Jackson. By morning, health inspectors would arrive for a routine inspection. By afternoon, code enforcement would discover structural concerns requiring immediate closure. Meanwhile, Curtis had teams investigating everyone in Danielle and Richard's circle, hunting for leverage. Jackson didn't want to destroy innocent people, but those actively participating in the campaign against him would learn why crossing him was a mistake. As dawn broke, Jackson stood at his office window, watching the city wake up. His phone buzzed with another news alert. Quantum Dynamics founder accused of stock manipulation. Round 2 had begun. Chapter 5, The Shadow War. They're coming after us from all angles, Preston Mills explained, pacing Jackson's office. The sexual harassment claims, the stock manipulation allegations, and now this whistleblower claiming you misrepresented technology capabilities to investors. Jackson remained calm, despite having slept only 3 hours in the past 2 days. What's our exposure? Minimal on the technical front. Our quantum processing claims are well documented and verified by independent labs. The harassment claims remain anonymous and unsubstantiated. The stock manipulation charge is the most concerning. They're alleging you deliberately suppressed Quantum's value before acquiring Morrison. Which is absurd, Jackson said. Why would I devalue my own company? Logic isn't driving this, Jackson. It's emotion. Specifically, a woman scorned and her ambitious lover. Jackson nodded. Have they approached any board members directly? Preston hesitated, which was answer enough. Who? Jackson asked. Douglas Carter. He says Richard Calloway reached out, suggesting that with all the turmoil surrounding your leadership, it might be best for the company if you step down temporarily while the allegations are investigated. Douglas was the oldest board member, conservative and risk-averse. If anyone would waver, it would be him. What was Douglas's response? Jackson asked. He brought it to me immediately, Preston said. He's loyal, but concerned. They all are. The stock has dropped 11% since the allegations began. Jackson checked his watch. It's time we change the narrative. Have the PR team ready for my announcement at noon. What announcement? You'll see. At precisely noon, Jackson stood before cameras in Quantum's main lobby. Flanking him were Vincent Blackwood and Priya Sharma. Good afternoon, he began. I've called this press conference to address the recent allegations against me and against Quantum Dynamics. He paused, making eye contact with several reporters. These claims are false, malicious, and timed precisely to damage both my reputation and this company following my public identification as founder. Rather than dignify each allegation with a specific denial, I am taking action that proves my confidence in Quantum's integrity and future. He gestured to Vincent, who handed him a document. Effective immediately, I am pledging 20% of my personal Quantum Dynamics shares, valued at approximately $3.2 billion, to establish the Quantum Initiative for Women in Technology. This foundation will provide scholarships, mentorship, and startup funding for women entering STEM fields, with particular emphasis on quantum computing. The room erupted with questions. Jackson held up a hand. Additionally, I am releasing my complete correspondence history with all quantum employees, dating back to the company's founding. These communications have been independently reviewed by Ethics First, a watchdog organization specializing in workplace harassment claims. Their full report, finding no evidence of misconduct, is available on our website as of this moment. He nodded to Priya, who stepped forward. As Chief Technology Officer and the highest-ranking woman at Quantum Dynamics, I can state unequivocally that Jackson Weber has created a culture of respect, inclusion, and meritocracy, she said firmly. The anonymous allegations against him contradict 8 years of my direct experience and observation. After the press conference, Jackson returned to his office to find Curtis watching the market reaction on multiple screens. Stocks rebounding, Curtis noted. Up 4% already. The commentators are calling your foundation move brilliant redirection. It's not just redirection, Jackson said. I've been planning that foundation for years. Danielle just accelerated the timeline. Speaking of your wife, Curtis pulled up surveillance photos on a tablet. She and Richard are meeting with Benjamin Morrison again, and there's someone new with them. Jackson studied the image, then froze. That's Lawrence Grant. Who's he? Department of Justice, Antitrust Division. He was leading the preliminary inquiry into the Morrison acquisition. Jackson's mind raced. They're feeding him something. Information or misinformation, doesn't matter. They're trying to trigger a full investigation. Curtis nodded. That fits with what our source at Danielle's attorney's office reports. They're trying to delay the divorce proceedings, hoping the DOJ investigation tanks quantum stock value before asset division is finalized. Smart play? Jackson admitted grudgingly. If she can drag out the divorce until after a DOJ announcement, she could claim I concealed the company's legal exposure during settlement talks. What's our counter? Jackson sat at his desk, mind calculating possibilities. First, we accelerate the divorce. Preston's firm handles both corporate and family law. Have him petition for an emergency hearing based on clear evidence of infidelity. Already in process. Second, we need to neutralize Morrison. What leverage do we have? Curtis swiped through several screens on his tablet. Financials show he borrowed heavily against his quantum stock to purchase property in Aspen and Maui immediately after the acquisition. If our stock drops significantly, he gets margin called, Jackson finished. So his cooperation with Danielle is financially motivated. He needs our stock to stay high enough to avoid losing his new mansions. Exactly. And there's more. His mistress is on Quantum's payroll, administrative position in the Denver office, arranged by Vincent as part of the acquisition deal. Jackson frowned. I didn't authorize that. It wasn't in the official terms. Vincent handled it privately. That was concerning. Vincent had always been meticulous about transparency in acquisitions. Why would he make this arrangement off the books? Get me everything on Vincent's communications with Morrison over the past 3 months, Jackson said. And keep this between us for now. The next morning brought a new development. Gregory Landau, Danielle's attorney, had filed a motion claiming Jackson had hidden assets and demanding a forensic accounting of all his holdings before divorce proceedings could continue. Classic delay tactic, Preston assured him. The judge will see through it. Maybe, but it buys them time, Jackson replied. Time for their DOJ connection to build a case. What's our next move? Jackson considered his options. Direct confrontation would play into their hands, making him appear vindictive. Backroom dealing with the DOJ could backfire spectacularly if discovered. We go public, he decided. Full transparency. I'll give an exclusive interview detailing the entire situation. The fake identity, the reason behind it, discovery of the affair, and now these coordinated attacks. Preston looked alarmed. That's extremely risky. Airing personal matters could make you appear unstable. Not if we control the narrative. Give me Abigail Winters. Abigail Winters was a respected journalist known for tough but fair reporting on tech industry matters. She'd been critical of quantum in the past, which would lend credibility to any positive story she wrote now. The interview was set for the following day. That evening, Jackson returned to his temporary apartment. He'd moved out of the house he'd shared with Danielle to find his security system had been triggered. Drawing the gun he'd started carrying since the threats began, he cautiously entered, only to find Vincent Blackwood sitting in his living room. "Jesus, Vincent," Jackson lowered the weapon. "You should have called first." Vincent looked haggard, the cancer treatments clearly taking their toll. "Sorry. Needed to speak with you away from the office. Away from ears." "What's wrong?" "I know about Ghost Protocol," Vincent said flatly. "I know what you're doing to Richard's business, to Morrison, to everyone who's aligned against you." Jackson poured 2 fingers of whiskey and handed one to Vincent. "They started this war, not me." "War," Vincent repeated, staring into his glass. "That's how you see it? Your wife cheated, so you destroy everyone connected to her." "It's more than cheating, and you know it. They're actively trying to take down Quantum, our life's work. 8 years building something revolutionary, and they want to burn it down out of spite." "Maybe," Vincent conceded. "But where does it end, Jackson? You crush Richard's restaurant, ruin Morrison financially, expose their affairs and corruptions. Then what? Does Danielle get destroyed too? Her mother? Anyone who ever sided with her?" "If necessary," Jackson said coldly. Vincent set down his untouched whiskey. "That's what I was afraid of. You've changed. I've adapted to the situation." "No." Vincent stood. "You've become the thing you always despised, a ruthless tech mogul who sees people as obstacles to be eliminated. That's not fair, isn't it? The Jackson Weber I met at MIT, the one with the vision for ethical quantum computing, for technology that served humanity rather than exploiting it. Would he recognize what you're doing now?" Jackson felt a flash of anger. The Jackson Weber you met at MIT was naive. He trusted people. He believed in the inherent goodness of humanity. He was a fool. "He was my friend," Vincent said quietly. "And I'm not sure you are anymore." After Vincent left, Jackson sat alone in the darkness, nursing his whiskey. His friend's words had struck deeper than he cared to admit. When had revenge become his primary motivation? When had winning become more important than doing what was right? His phone buzzed with a text from Curtis, possible breakthrough. "Call me ASAP." The message dragged him back to the present conflict. Vincent's concerns would have to wait. There was a war to win first. Chapter 6, Revelations. The morning of Jackson's interview with Abigail Winters, Curtis made a discovery that changed everything. "You need to see this," he said, dropping a file on Jackson's desk. "Vincent's been communicating with Richard Calloway for months. Since before your Thanksgiving revelation." Jackson stared at the evidence: phone logs, encrypted messages recovered through sophisticated means, location data showing meetings that couldn't be coincidental. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Vincent has been with me from the beginning. He's my oldest friend. The evidence is solid, boss." They met regularly, always off the grid, always during times when Vincent claimed to be at medical appointments. Jackson felt physically ill. "What about his cancer? Is that real?" "The cancer's real. Stage 3 pancreatic. His treatments are legitimate." Jackson tried to process this information. "So what's the connection? Why would Vincent betray me?" Curtis hesitated. "There's more. I found financial transfers from a shell corporation controlled by Vincent to accounts associated with Danielle, dating back almost 2 years. 2 years, Jackson repeated numbly. The timeline matched when he'd first noticed Danielle's attitude changing, when he'd made the decision to step into the shadows at Quantum. "There's something else you should know," Curtis added, visibly uncomfortable. Facial recognition picked up Vincent entering Richard's apartment building multiple times when Danielle was there. The timestamps. He didn't need to finish. The implication was clear. Vincent and Danielle? Jackson felt like he'd been punched. "Are you saying my wife was sleeping with both Vincent and Richard?" "The evidence suggests a complicated relationship between the 3 of them." Jackson's mind raced through memories, recalibrating them with this new information. Vincent's encouragement when Jackson had first considered stepping out of the public eye. Danielle's sudden interest in working at Richard's restaurant. Vincent's inexplicable off-books arrangement for Morrison's mistress. It had all been orchestrated. "They've been playing me," he realized aloud. "For years. It appears so." Jackson canceled the interview with Abigail Winters, claiming a family emergency. He needed time to think, to reevaluate his entire approach. That afternoon, he called an emergency meeting with Priya and Preston, the only 2 executives he now felt he could trust completely. He showed them the evidence against Vincent. I don't know what to say." Priya looked devastated. Vincent was my mentor. I thought I knew him. We all did, Jackson said grimly. The question is, what's their endgame? Vincent holds significant stock options, but nowhere near enough to take control of Quantum. Preston studied the financial records. These transfers to Danielle suggest something more personal than financial. Could it be as simple as two men in love with the same woman? Priya suggested. Jackson shook his head. No, there's something bigger at play. Vincent isn't risking everything. His reputation, his legacy, potentially his freedom if these financial irregularities constitute fraud, just for Danielle. He paced the conference room. Think about it. Vincent has been the face of Quantum for years. He's enjoyed the public recognition, the speaking engagements, the cover of Forbes. Then suddenly I decide to reclaim my identity as founder. You think this is about ego? Preston asked. Partly, but also about control. Jackson tapped the financial records. These payments to Danielle started right when our quantum processing breakthrough occurred, the advance that put us years ahead of competitors. Priya's eyes widened. The technology Vincent presented to the NSA last year. The one that got us the defense contract. Exactly. Jackson felt the pieces clicking into place. Vincent has been positioning himself to break away. He needed our core technology, and he needed me discredited or removed. The affair with my wife. That was just a bonus and a way to manipulate Danielle. But how does Richard fit into this? Preston asked. Leverage and convenience. Richard's restaurant is popular with tech executives and government officials. Perfect for unofficial meetings that never appear on calendars. Jackson pulled up a map on the conference room screen. Richard's restaurant, his apartment building, and 3 properties recently purchased by shell companies linked to Vincent all form a triangle around the proposed site for the new NSA Quantum Computing Center. Priya gasped softly. The $10 billion government project. Quantum is on the short list of contractors. Along with Zenith Systems, the company Vincent's brother-in-law founded last year. Preston whistled low. So the plan is what? Discredit you, tank Quantum's reputation with the government, and steer the contract to Zenith with Vincent providing the stolen technology. That's my guess. Jackson turned to face them. And it would have worked if Danielle and Richard hadn't gotten careless. If I hadn't discovered the affair when I did. So what's our countermove? Priya asked. Jackson thought for a moment. We don't make one. Not yet. Vincent doesn't know that we know. For now, we let him think his plan is working. While we do what? Preston looked skeptical. While we gather conclusive evidence of technology theft and interference with government contracts, both federal crimes. Vincent's not the only one who can play shadow games. As they left the meeting, Priya pulled Jackson aside. I'm sorry about Danielle. And Vincent. It's a double betrayal. Jackson nodded, his expression grim. I allowed myself to be blindsided because I trusted both of them. That won't happen again. That night, alone in his apartment, Jackson reviewed everything he knew about Vincent, searching for signs he might have missed. Vincent had been by his side since MIT, through the early struggles of startup life, through the lean years before Quantum's breakthrough. They'd shared meals, dreams, setbacks, and triumphs. Had it all been a calculated facade? Or had something changed along the way? His phone rang. Danielle. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. What do you want? His voice was cold. Jackson. She sounded desperate. You need to listen to me. I know how this looks, but you don't understand what's really happening. Enlighten me. Not over the phone. We need to meet. Face to face, just you and me. There are things you don't know about Vincent, about all of this. Jackson laughed bitterly. You expect me to trust you now? After everything? No, she said quietly. I don't. But you need to hear this, for your own safety. Vincent is not who you think he is. He never was. And who is he, Danielle? Your lover? Your co-conspirator? The man you betrayed our marriage for? There was a long pause. It's not that simple. Please, Jackson. Tomorrow, noon, at the Botanical Garden. The Japanese Pavilion. Come alone. She hung up before he could respond. Jackson immediately called Curtis. Danielle just contacted me, wants to meet tomorrow. Says she has information about Vincent. It's a trap, Curtis said flatly. Obviously. But I want to know what game they're playing. Have a team in place, full surveillance. I want eyes on her from the moment she leaves her apartment until she returns. Will do. But be careful, boss. These people have already shown they're willing to go to extraordinary lengths to hurt you. Jackson hung up and stared out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring a new chapter in this twisted game. Whatever Danielle had to say, he was certain of one thing. The truth was still being hidden from him, and he would find it, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The Meeting. The Japanese pavilion in the botanical garden was deliberately chosen, Jackson realized. Isolated, difficult to approach without being seen, with multiple exit paths. Danielle might be many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He arrived early, allowing Curtis's team to establish surveillance positions. The December air was crisp, the garden largely empty on a weekday morning. At precisely noon, Danielle appeared on the path. She wore a simple gray coat and no makeup, a stark contrast to her usually polished appearance. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days. "You came," she said, keeping several feet between them. "Curiosity," Jackson replied. "Nothing more." Danielle glanced around nervously. "We don't have much time. Vincent has people watching me." "So do I," Jackson said flatly. "Get to the point." She took a deep breath. "Vincent approached me 2 years ago. He said he knew things about you, dangerous things. That you were involved in illegal technology transfers to foreign entities. That you were planning to sell Quantum's breakthroughs to the Chinese government." Jackson stared at her, genuinely shocked. "And you believe that? About me?" "I didn't want to," she said, eyes downcast. "But he had documents, emails, photos of you meeting with people identified as Chinese intelligence agents. It looked real." "It wasn't. I know that now." Her voice cracked. "Vincent said the FBI was building a case against you. That when they moved, everything would be seized. The company, our assets, everything. He offered to help protect me. By sleeping with him," Jackson said coldly. Danielle flinched. "It wasn't like that at first. He positioned himself as a friend, a confidant, someone who understood what I was going through. The affair, that came later. And Richard? Was he part of Vincent's master plan too?" She shook her head. "Richard was my mistake. Vincent introduced us, suggested I take the job at the restaurant to establish financial independence before your arrest. Richard knew nothing about Vincent's claims. He was kind to me when I thought my world was collapsing." Jackson laughed bitterly. "So you're the victim here? Manipulated by Vincent, seeking comfort with Richard?" "No," she said firmly. "I made my choices. I betrayed you. I should have trusted you enough to ask you directly about Vincent's accusations. I should have believed in the man I married. Why are you telling me this now?" Danielle reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a USB drive. "Because last week, I overheard Vincent and Richard arguing. Vincent threatened him, said if Richard didn't cooperate with the next phase, he'd end up like the others." "What others?" "I don't know, but it scared me enough to start digging." She held out the drive. "This contains everything Vincent gave me about you, plus recordings I've made of our conversations over the past month. He's planning something, Jackson. Something beyond discrediting you or stealing technology." Jackson didn't reach for the drive. "Why should I believe any of this? You've been working actively to destroy me, my reputation, my company. Because despite everything, I don't want to see you dead." The word hung in the cold air between them. "Dead," Jackson repeated. "The way Vincent talks now, it's different. Colder. When he discusses you, there's no emotion. It's like he's talking about removing an obstacle, not a person. Not his oldest friend." Jackson studied her face, looking for deception. What she was suggesting seemed impossible. Vincent, methodical, brilliant, sometimes ruthless in business, but violent? A killer? "The cancer," Danielle continued. "It's real, but it's more advanced than he's told you. The doctors gave him 6 months, maximum. He has nothing to lose." Jackson finally took the USB drive. "If you're playing me, Danielle." "I'm not." Her eyes met his directly. "I've done enough damage. I can't undo what happened, but I can try to stop what's coming. Why did you agree with your mother at Thanksgiving? About my salary being pathetic?" Danielle looked away. "Because by then, I believed I was married to a criminal who was going to prison. I was angry, hurt, and yes, ashamed of what I thought was the truth. It was easier to let my mother believe I'd married beneath me than explain that I'd married a traitor." Before Jackson could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Curtis. "Multiple unknown subjects approaching your location. Armed. Evacuate now." Jackson grabbed Danielle's arm. "We need to go? Now. What's happening?" "Vincent's people are here. Armed." Fear flashed across her face. "There's a service exit through the greenhouse. This way." They moved quickly through the pavilion toward the greenhouse beyond. Jackson heard Curtis in his earpiece. 3 subjects, professional stance, carrying concealed. They're blocking the main exits. As they reached the greenhouse door, Jackson spotted a man in a dark coat approaching rapidly from their left, hand moving inside his jacket. Down! Jackson shoved Danielle through the door as the man drew a weapon. The shot shattered glass behind them. Jackson pulled his own gun, the one he'd started carrying after the threats began, and fired back, forcing their attacker to take cover. Inside the greenhouse, they sprinted past startled gardeners and visitors. Danielle led them through a maintenance area to a service door that opened onto a back street. Curtis's voice came through the earpiece. Vehicle approaching your position, black SUV, our team. The SUV screeched to a halt beside them. They dove in as more shots rang out. Are you hit? Jackson demanded, checking Danielle for injuries. No, she gasped. You? He shook his head, then addressed the security team. Get us to the contingency location and find out who those shooters were. In the secure apartment Curtis had prepared for emergencies, Jackson inserted Danielle's USB drive into an isolated computer system. The files contained exactly what she'd described, fabricated evidence painting Jackson as a technology trader, along with recent audio recordings of Vincent. In one particularly chilling conversation, Vincent discussed the Weber problem with someone identified only as director. The situation requires permanent resolution, Vincent's voice said calmly. The timetable has accelerated. Weber knows too much. You're authorized to proceed, the other voice responded. But clean. No connection to the project. Jackson looked at Danielle, who sat pale and shaken on the couch. Who is the director? I don't know. Vincent never used names. But he mentioned a meeting at the Pentagon last week. Jackson's mind raced. The NSA quantum computing contract, the fake evidence of technology transfer to China, Vincent's increasingly erratic behavior. It all pointed to something much bigger than personal betrayal or corporate espionage. Vincent isn't just stealing technology, Jackson realized. He's working with someone in intelligence. They're weaponizing our quantum processing architecture. Danielle looked confused. Weaponizing? How? Our quantum system can break any existing encryption in seconds. In the wrong hands, it could compromise every secure system on the planet. Military, financial, infrastructure. Jackson paced the room. But that doesn't explain why they need me out of the way so badly. Vincent already has access to the technology. Maybe it's not just about the technology, Danielle suggested. Maybe it's about what you would do with it. Jackson stopped pacing. The ethical guardrails. The protocols I built into the system that prevent certain applications. He turned to her. Vincent needs me gone because I'm the only one who can stop them from using quantum's technology for unrestricted surveillance or offensive cyber operations. What are you going to do? Jackson checked his watch. Vincent thinks his hitmen got us at the botanical garden. That buys us some time. He turned to Curtis. Get Priya and Preston here. Secure channel, no electronics. We need to implement Phoenix Protocol. Phoenix Protocol? Danielle asked. What's that? The contingency I created in case quantum's technology was ever compromised. Jackson's expression was grim. It's a kill switch that renders the quantum architecture useless without destroying the underlying systems. You can do that remotely? Not remotely. It requires physical access to 3 separate servers simultaneously, with biometric confirmation from authorized personnel. Jackson looked at her. That's why they couldn't just kill me quietly. They need my biometrics, retinal scan, voice print, and palm geometry to override the safeguards. Understanding dawned on Danielle's face. They were never going to kill you at the garden. They were going to take you. Exactly. Jackson turned as Priya and Preston arrived, both looking alarmed. Is it true? Priya demanded. Vincent tried to have you killed, captured, not killed, Jackson clarified. And yes, we have confirmation that he's working with someone high up in intelligence to weaponize our quantum system. Jesus, Preston muttered. What's the plan? Jackson outlined his strategy. They would split into 3 teams, each targeting one of the critical server nodes needed to activate Phoenix Protocol. Meanwhile, Curtis would gather evidence against Vincent and his government conspirators. What about the company? Preston asked. Phoenix Protocol will set our processing capabilities back years. Better than having them used for unlimited surveillance or offensive cyber attacks. Jackson replied. Once the system is secure, we can rebuild it with better safeguards. I want to help, Danielle said quietly. Jackson studied her. Despite everything, he believed her fear was genuine. Whether that translated to trustworthiness was another question. You'll stay with Curtis, he decided. Help him identify everyone Vincent has been working with. As the teams prepared to move out, Jackson took one last look at the evidence Danielle had provided. Something still didn't add up. Vincent had known him for nearly 20 years. He understood Jackson's ethical stance on technology misuse. Why orchestrate such an elaborate betrayal instead of simply trying to convince him that military applications were necessary? The answer had to be in the files. Jackson copied everything to a secure tablet and tucked it into his jacket. He'd review it en route to the server facility. Whatever Vincent's true motivation, one thing was certain. The climax of this silent war was approaching, and only one of them would emerge victorious. Chapter 8. Endgame. The primary server facility for quantum dynamics occupied a nondescript building outside Boulder, Colorado. To casual observers, it resembled a data center for a mid-sized corporation, exactly the point. The truly revolutionary quantum processors were housed in a subterranean facility beneath the mundane exterior. Jackson's team arrived at dusk, using employee credentials that hadn't yet been revoked. Vincent, believing Jackson was either captured or dead, hadn't initiated emergency protocols to lock down the systems. Overconfidence, Jackson murmured as they passed through security checkpoints with surprising ease. Always was his weakness. Priya's team was simultaneously accessing the second server node at their Seattle facility, while Preston led the third team at the Austin location. All three nodes had to be accessed within a 5-minute window for Phoenix Protocol to activate. We're in position. Priya's voice came through the secure comms. Ready on your mark. Austin team in position, Preston confirmed. Jackson checked his watch. Synchronized for execution at 19:30 hours. That gives us 7 minutes to reach the server floor. As they descended to the subterranean levels, Jackson's tablet pinged with an alert from Curtis. He opened the message to find a video file with a simple note. Watch this. Found in Vincent's encrypted cloud storage. Jackson plugged in earbuds and played the video as they continued downward. It showed Vincent in a hospital room, looking gaunt and weak, clearly after a cancer treatment session. A man in a military uniform sat beside the bed, his face just out of camera range. The prognosis is confirmed, the military man said. Stage 4. Terminal. Vincent nodded, his expression eerily calm. How long? 3 months. Maybe 4. Enough time to complete the project? If Weber cooperates. If not, Vincent stared directly at the camera. He won't. Jackson's idealism blinds him to reality. He believes technology should serve humanity, not control it. Then the alternative plan remains in effect. The technology is too important. I know. Vincent closed his eyes briefly. I've made my peace with what needs to be done. The video ended, leaving Jackson with more questions than answers. Who was the military officer? What project were they discussing? And most importantly, why was Vincent recording these conversations? They reached the server level, passing through final security checks with Jackson's biometric credentials. The quantum processing core hummed with quiet power, the culmination of 8 years of revolutionary engineering. 2 minutes to synchronization, Jackson announced, approaching the main terminal. Initiating Phoenix sequence. His fingers flew across the keyboard, entering the first layer of commands. The system responded. Phoenix Protocol initiated. Awaiting biometric confirmation from all authorized nodes. 1 minute. Jackson said into the comm, stand by for simultaneous authentication. As the countdown continued, a voice came from behind them. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Jackson turned to find Vincent Blackwood standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 armed men in tactical gear. Despite his illness, Vincent projected an aura of calm authority. How did you find us? Jackson asked, subtly signaling his team to hold position. You're predictable, Jackson. Always have been. Vincent stepped forward. The moment our team failed to secure you at the botanical garden, I knew you'd head for the kill switch. 30 seconds, Priya's voice came through the comm. Vincent glanced at Jackson's earpiece. Priya and Preston are at the other nodes, I assume? Tell them to stand down, or my teams at those locations will be forced to take action. Jackson kept his expression neutral. What happened to you, Vincent? We built quantum together to advance human knowledge, not to create the ultimate surveillance weapon. Cancer happened. Vincent's smile was bitter. Facing your mortality has a way of clarifying priorities. Do you know what I realized while poisonous chemicals dripped into my veins? That your ethical constraints are luxury beliefs. The world doesn't operate on ideals, Jackson. It operates on power. 15 seconds, Preston's voice reported. This isn't about philosophical differences, Jackson said, stalling. You're working with military intelligence to weaponize our quantum architecture. You betrayed everything we stand for. I secured our legacy. Vincent snapped, emotion breaking through his calm facade. The NSA contract is just the beginning. With unrestricted quantum processing capabilities, America maintains technological superiority for decades. Our names will be in history books. 5 seconds, Priya whispered. Jackson held Vincent's gaze. I'd rather be forgotten than remembered for creating the tool that ended privacy forever. Now, Jackson shouted into the calm. He slammed his palm onto the biometric reader as Priya and Preston did the same at their locations. The system flashed. Biometric confirmation received. Phoenix protocol executing. Vincent lunged forward, but too late. The quantum processors began their controlled shutdown sequence. On screens throughout the facility, core systems went dark one by one. What have you done? Vincent whispered, watching years of work systematically neutralized. Protected our creation from misuse, Jackson replied. The quantum architecture will rebuild itself with the ethical parameters intact. No one, not you, not your military friends, can override them now. Vincent's face contorted with rage. You fool. The world needed this technology. We were on the verge of complete information dominance. That's exactly what I'm preventing. Jackson nodded to his security team, who had subdued Vincent's guards during the distraction. It's over, Vincent. Curtis has already delivered evidence of your conspiracy to the FBI and selected journalists. By morning, your military backers will be scrambling to distance themselves. Vincent's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. For a moment, Jackson glimpsed the brilliant, idealistic friend he'd once known. I'm dying, Jackson, Vincent said quietly. I wanted to leave something behind. Something that mattered. You already did. The quantum breakthroughs we created will transform medicine, climate science, materials engineering. They'll save millions of lives. But they could have done so much more. Jackson shook his head. Not without destroying what makes those lives worth living. Freedom, privacy, human dignity. As federal agents arrived to take Vincent into custody, Jackson felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what had been lost. His oldest friend, his marriage, the innocent belief that technology alone could solve humanity's problems. Outside the facility, in the clear Colorado night, Jackson found Danielle waiting with Curtis. Her face showed relief when she saw him emerge unharmed. It's done, she asked. Phoenix protocol executed successfully. The quantum architecture is secure. Jackson studied her in the moonlight. Thank you. For the warning, for the evidence. You didn't have to help. Yes, I did. She hesitated. What happens now? With us? Jackson considered the question. The betrayal still hurt, but understanding Vincent's manipulation provided context he'd lacked before. The divorce proceeds, he said finally. Too much has happened for us to go back. But perhaps we can move forward with less animosity than before. Danielle nodded, acceptance in her eyes. I never stopped caring about you, Jackson, even when I believed the worst. I know, but caring isn't enough for a marriage. Trust is. He offered his hand, a peace gesture rather than reconciliation. Good luck, Danielle. As she walked away, Curtis approached. The board's been notified of the situation. They're calling an emergency session to discuss interim leadership. Tell them I'll be there. After I get some sleep. For the first time in months, Jackson felt the weight lifting from his shoulders. The silent war was over. Now came the harder part, rebuilding what had been broken, not just within quantum dynamics, but within himself. Chapter 9, New Foundations. 6 months after Phoenix Protocol, Jackson Weber stood at the podium in Quantum Dynamics' newly completed headquarters. Behind him, a wall of glass revealed the Boulder Mountains, their peaks still snow-capped in June. Today marks not just the opening of a building, he told the assembled employees and press, but the beginning of Quantum's second chapter. Our technological setback has become our greatest opportunity, a chance to rebuild with wisdom gained from experience. The crowd applauded. The official story, that a catastrophic system failure had necessitated rebuilding the quantum architecture, had been accepted by the public. Few knew the truth about Vincent's conspiracy or the military intelligence operation that had nearly weaponized their technology. Vincent himself was serving a 5-year sentence for corporate espionage and conspiracy. His cancer had responded surprisingly well to an experimental treatment, giving him more time than expected, time to reflect on his choices. After the ceremony, Priya joined Jackson in his new office. As Quantum's new CEO, Jackson had stepped back to Chief Science Officer. She'd helped navigate the company through its most difficult period. "Impressive speech," she said, accepting the sparkling water he offered. "Though I notice you didn't mention the Q3 projections." Jackson smiled. "No need to scare everyone on our big day. The rebuilding process is on schedule. By next quarter, we'll have restored 90% of our processing capabilities, with the ethical guardrails even stronger than before. And the government contracts? Limited to civilian applications only. Medical research, climate modeling, materials science. No surveillance, no cryptography breaking, no weapons systems." Priya nodded approvingly. "The board took that better than I expected. They didn't have much choice after the Vincent scandal. Besides, our civilian applications will generate more sustainable revenue long-term." A knock at the door interrupted them. Jackson's assistant poked her head in. "Mr. Weber? There's someone here to see you. Says she has an appointment." Jackson checked his calendar, finding no entries. "Who is it?" "Danielle Weber." "Well, Danielle Preston now, I suppose." Jackson and Priya exchanged surprised glances. He hadn't seen Danielle since their divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. "It's fine, send her in," he said. "Priya, would you excuse us?" Priya tactfully withdrew as Danielle entered. She looked different, hair shorter, style more professional than the socialite fashion she'd favored during their marriage. She carried a leather portfolio and wore a visitor's badge. "Hello, Jackson," she said, voice steady but not cold. "Thank you for seeing me." "Of course." He gestured to a chair. "What brings you here?" Danielle sat, setting her portfolio on the desk. "Business, actually. I've started a foundation focused on ethics and technology. The Preston Foundation for Responsible Innovation." "Preston? As in Gregory Preston from Legal?" "His uncle, actually." She smiled slightly. "We met during the divorce proceedings. He's been mentoring me." Jackson leaned back, genuinely curious. "A technology ethics foundation is quite a departure from restaurant management." "Yes, well, after everything that happened." She met his eyes directly. "I saw firsthand how technology created with the best intentions can be weaponized. It changed my perspective." She opened her portfolio, revealing a prospectus. "We're focusing on education initially. University programs that integrate ethics directly into computer science and engineering curricula. Eventually, we hope to establish certification standards for ethical AI and quantum computing applications." Jackson skimmed the materials, impressed despite himself. "This is thoughtfully structured. Who's funding it?" "I used my divorce settlement as seed funding," Danielle said without apology. "Gregory's family provided matching funds. And Richard Calloway is hosting our fundraising events at what remains of his restaurant empire." At the mention of Richard, Jackson felt a flicker of the old anger, quickly replaced by something like amusement. "How is Richard? I hear his new location isn't doing quite as well as the original." "He's managing." Danielle's tone made it clear that romance had not survived their ordeal. "The foundation gives him some positive PR, which he desperately needs." Jackson handed back the prospectus. "So what do you want from me? Quantum's endorsement? Funding? Partnership?" She pulled out another document. "We're establishing an advisory board of industry leaders willing to implement and test our ethical frameworks. Having quantum dynamics involved would send a powerful message." Jackson studied her for a long moment. The woman before him was not the same one who had nodded in agreement when her mother called his salary pathetic. There was a purpose to her now, a conviction that hadn't existed before. "Why should I trust you, Danielle? After everything?" She didn't flinch from the question. "You shouldn't, necessarily. Trust has to be rebuilt. But this isn't about us. It's about ensuring what happened with Vincent can't happen again, anywhere." Her sincerity was persuasive. Jackson thought of the lessons he'd learned through the crucible of betrayal and revenge, how easily righteousness could become ruthlessness, how pain could warp principles. "I'll consider it," he said finally. "Have your people send the full proposal to Priya. We'll review it officially." Relief showed briefly on Danielle's face. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking for." As she gathered her materials, Jackson asked, "Are you happy, Danielle, with your new direction?" She paused, considering the question. "I'm purposeful. After feeling manipulated for so long, by Vincent, by my mother's expectations, by my own insecurities, it's empowering to build something meaningful." She met his eyes. "Are you happy, Jackson?" "Getting there," he admitted. "Building something new is always easier than rebuilding after destruction." At the door, Danielle turned back. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for the affair, but for doubting you when I should have trusted you." Jackson nodded. "I know. Good luck with your foundation, Danielle." After she left, Jackson walked to the window, gazing out at the mountains. The betrayal had changed him, made him more cautious, less naive, but also more committed to his original vision. Quantum technology that served humanity rather than controlled it. His phone buzzed with a message from Curtis. "Final surveillance has been removed from Danielle's residence as requested. Clean break complete." Jackson smiled slightly. The revenge that had consumed him had evolved into something more constructive, a determination to protect his life's work and use it for good. The victory wasn't in destroying those who had betrayed him, but in reclaiming his purpose despite them. Later that evening, as employees and guests celebrated the headquarters opening with champagne and optimistic toasts, Jackson slipped away to his private lab in the building's secure sublevel. Here, away from corporate politics and public relations, he could focus on what had always driven him: the pure science, the possibilities that quantum computing offered humanity. On his workbench sat the prototype for Quantum's next-generation processor, smaller, more efficient, and designed from the ground up with unbreakable ethical constraints. The future he'd always envisioned. His phone rang, the secure line only 3 people had access to. "Weber," he answered. "It's Preston. The NSA approached us again. Different people this time, different approach. They're offering unrestricted funding for the medical applications if we'll consult on certain classified projects." Jackson sighed. Some battles would always need refighting. "Tell them the same thing we told the last group. Quantum's technology is not for sale, rent, or consultation on classified military applications. Not now, not ever." "I figured you'd say that. Just thought you should know they're still trying." "They'll always be trying," Jackson replied. "That's why we have to remain vigilant." After hanging up, Jackson returned to his work, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as he refined algorithms that would help cure diseases, mitigate climate change, and solve long-standing scientific mysteries. This was his true revenge against those who had tried to corrupt his vision, not their destruction, but the triumph of his principles. The silent empire he'd built would remain silent no longer. Its power would speak through its contributions to humanity, not through dominance or control. In that transformation lay Jackson Weber's greatest victory, not over his enemies, but over the darkness that had threatened to consume him in his quest for vengeance. As midnight approached and the celebration finally wound down, Jackson left the building last, nodding to the security team as he departed. In his car, he opened the glove compartment and removed the CEO badge he'd dramatically dropped on Margaret Weather's Thanksgiving table many months ago. He turned it over in his hands, remembering the shock on their faces, the vindication he'd felt in that moment of revelation. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Jackson placed the badge back in the compartment. That chapter was closed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to defend his vision against those who would corrupt it. But tonight, for the first time since discovering Danielle's betrayal, he drove home feeling something like peace. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.